Very good morning to you. Welcome along to Thursday mornings Off the Ball AM. As ever, if you want to get involved, feel free to tweet us. We're at Off the Ball AM on Twitter, or you can get us on the comment section on the YouTube feed, which is live now, youtube.com/Off the Ball. Just click the live button there. Or, of course, you can subscribe to us on Facebook and turn on notifications. So anytime that we go live from the studio, or indeed from the golf, as we are every evening at the moment, as the Irish Open kicks off, has teed off in the last while, then you'll also get notifications. Owen, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
24 hours without football. It was a bit weird, wasn't it?
It was strange. There was this empty feeling of not having to, keep the eyes open for a 3 o'clock game, where naturally from this time of the morning you start to nod off a little bit.
It's true, isn't it? There's definitely like a 3 o'clock, I'm just going to lie here for a while and slowly die.
And then you wake up and Brazil are 2-0 up. That's usually what's happened over the course of the World Cup.
No, I didn't miss it. I definitely didn't miss it. I saw every bit of it. And just going to check the goals on Twitter.
And in the intervening 2-hour period between the two games, you're just rewinding, trying to watch back the entire match. So it was good to avoid that for once. But I'm almost feeling wistful that it's almost at an end now. It's like this is business end. Rest days mean we're getting into the business end, and it's going to be a good couple of days, particularly Friday, tomorrow. It's going to be two outstanding games. You've got the good side of the draw. You've got the France, Uruguay, Brazil, Belgium side of the draw. Yeah,
loads of interesting stuff coming out about Uruguay, how all of a sudden Luis Suarez is a role model for the rest of them, and Tavares has somehow calmed him down. I don't believe that for a second. I'm not in any way ruling out the possibility that he bites, kicks, gouges somebody. And frankly, I would be disappointed if he doesn't at some point.
Well, I would be disappointed as a Uruguayan if he didn't, because it seems that's how you get the best out of Luis Suarez. Kind of like Diego Costa, you need him. You need him raging a little bit, and he's been quite subdued. He's been quite poor at times during this World Cup. Not with any kind of glaring errors or anything, just a lack of involvement at times. Just not that extra edge that is required, and that edge can be sought with the biting, with the punching, with the eye gouging, whatever it may be. So Oscar Tavares has a dilemma in his hands. Do I want him to score goals and bite people, or do I want him to be a bit part player and not bite people? So for the sake of cannibalism, I think it's a fair trade-off.
It's important that cannibalism gets a fair crack of the whip. In retrospect, should Fernando Hierro have dropped Diego Costa and kind of needled him a little bit so that he was pissed off coming into the knockout stages? Would that have been a better treatment to incite him to riot?
I don't think so. I think Fernando Hierro might have been better off to, structure a plan B around Diego Costa. You know that thing that he did in the first game where they put a ball directly on top of his head and he killed Pepe and scored an unbelievable goal? Maybe if they did that a little bit more throughout the course of the tournament, they might still be alive in this tournament. Maybe if they did that once in the game against Russia, they might still be alive in this tournament instead of getting on their jet back to Madrid and Barcelona at this point. So it's like, that's it really. I think Diego Costa was ready to rock, and he showed that in game one, and Hierro just didn't get the best out of him. So it was a tactical failure rather than a human one.
All right, let's tell you what's coming up on the show today. We have the remarkable story of Kieran McGeeney's qualifier records. Tommy did a bit of research yesterday. Looked through some results and found that he has one of the most remarkable records in Gaelic football, in inter-county Gaelic football, for this particular section of the season, between the bit where his team gets unceremoniously dumped out in the early stages of the Leinster/Ulster Football Championship, and then ultimately qualifies for the All-Ireland quarter-final. 25 from 29?
Yes, an 85% record, I think.
86%.
86%.
Yeah. It is ridiculous. Yeah, so we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later on. We'll also preview the weekend's Gaelic football action, particularly with respect to the Tyrone game. And McGinley's going to join us. Niall McCoy of Gaelic Life is going to join us as well. Then we're going to talk about Russia's World Cup. We're going to join Irish journalist Bryan MacDonald, who is living and working in Russia and has been a fairly outspoken critic of the way that the Russian life and society and political system is portrayed in the Western media. And certainly the stories coming back from Russia, particularly from John Duggan and from everybody else who's out there, is that it's been an amazing place, unbelievably welcoming, beautiful, and not the cartoonish land of fear and racism and homophobia that we had been led to believe by the media in this part of the world. That's Tommy's shadow across the screen there. Hey Tommy, just dropping in some water. Oh, and look, all of a sudden I've got some water to help me stop.
Salbutamol filled water.
Yeah, to stop coughing. I hope it's got something else in it. And then we're going to talk about Irish sailing, which obviously is undergoing a bit of a growth spurt itself at the moment. That's coming up at around about 9:10. We're going to bring you through the sports pages now.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
It's funny how my voice is fine up until like 8:45, 8:46, 7:45, 7:46, and then all of a sudden it's like, no.
It's nerves. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Just pure nerves.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so the order of the newspapers. This morning we're going to start with the Irish Independent. Donegal facing Croker snub. This is Martin Brownie's story. They're getting snubbed. We're going to snub you out, Donegal. Who the hell do you think you are coming up here and asking us to change our unfair rules? Snub, snub, snub.
And not only are they going to snub them, they're going to snub them in Cavan of all places. They're going to go to their own province and say, snub you, Donegal. And yeah, whatever the verbal version of that is.
I wouldn't be surprised if the new Director General takes the opportunity from this meeting to say, we are going to go to the Management Committee and suggest a rule change at the next Congress. And we're going to oversee that process and we're going to talk to Dublin about it and we're going to talk to all the stakeholders and we'll come up with a fair plan. Because we accept the point that you're making. It is unfair. And it's unfortunate that when Congress was looking at the Super 8s, that actually what they did was they took the whole thing in its totality and put it all through because that was the only way to get the rules through. And it was an oversight. And fair enough, you've raised the point, and you are the first ones, and we congratulate you on that. And thanks very much for bringing that to our attention. I think that's what the new Director General is going to do today, and I think he's going to come out of this much stronger and much more important figure in the public's eye than he was in the lead up to it. And I think he's actually responsible for Croke Park backing down with the Newbridge situation.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately this is going to be a really important 10 days in his tenure. And I think that actually Tom Ryan is going to come out of this really well. And Donegal have actually done the whole GAA a favour. And I don't think this is a snub. I think this headline where Donegal are getting snubbed by this is wrong. I think that ultimately what Donegal have done here is what all GAA communities should do and say, we don't think this is fair. We don't actually think we're going to win this thing. But what we're doing is highlighting an inconsistency and saying, this isn't fair, maybe we should all revisit this and fix it.
Yeah, it's true. Like, just on the Tom Ryan point there, it was interesting that Cian O'Neill singled him out for praise in Newbridge on the post-match comments on Sky last week. I thought that was very telling, that this whole kind of... The invisible hand is how Tom Ryan has been described by people like Joe Brolly in the past couple of months when he was elected as the Director General of the GAA, which can be seen as a negative term. And in actual fact, he's actually more of an invisible man, that all the good stuff that he doesn't really claim praise for it. He doesn't really look for the headlines. He doesn't really go out and say, can you actually call me up there? I'd love to speak on your show and just tell you about all the amazing things I did for Kildare there last week. Yeah. He didn't do that once. Like, to be fair, like I would have been of a critical mind last week when I'm like, where's Tom Ryan been? Why isn't he speaking about this? Well, in actual fact, he's been working. He's been behind the scenes working,
doing his job.
Doing his job, exactly. And he strikes me as the type of guy who is going to work hard behind the scenes and doesn't really care what the public think. He's going to do what he feels is best for the GAA and for the GAA community. And I think you're absolutely right in what's going to happen here. I think that's exactly the outcome, and that's how this thing is going to play out this afternoon. It's going to be an acceptance from the GAA that this thing probably isn't right, but it's also an acceptance from them that they probably can't fix it this year.
Yeah, and from Donegal saying, look, we raised the point. People have been getting in touch with us on Twitter going, oh, was it fair that Galway never got a home game in Leinster in the hurling? Was it fair? And like Stephen Doyle has a piece up on offtheball.com talking about how it wasn't fair that the Dublin hurlers had to go to Thurles to play a game which was supposed to be neutral, except it was against Tipperary. And those things aren't fair. And actually, you know what? It is important that we bring all these things up. But the fact that Galway got screwed doesn't mean that it's okay that everybody else gets screwed now into the future. That Galway situation, as we've just seen, has been, the beginnings of it are starting to be fixed anyway, because Galway won the under-21 Leinster hurling title yesterday with the last gasp goal against Wexford in one of the best hurling matches potentially of all time. And we would have been denied that if the whole Galway situation hadn't been fixed. There's the headline. Those seeking fairness in GAA competitions didn't seem too concerned about the Dublin GAA hurlers last summer. It's a good piece and you should read it from Stephen, and it brings a bit of balance to this whole thing. Galway hurlers had no home games until this year. Our under-21s played Tip and Thurles in 2010 All-Ireland final and got beaten 5-22 to 12 points. Spare us the Dublin sob story. No, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. You got screwed. Doesn't mean everybody else should also get screwed. It should be this is the last time that somebody's going to get screwed. It's kind of a very Irish attitude. It's like, well, I've done that, you're going to done that too. As opposed to, okay, I've taken this one. Why don't we all learn from this collectively and try and become a better community because of it? And that's why I think Tom Ryan's going to have an influence today, and hopefully come out and say, yeah, we're going to fix this. You're right. It's brilliant that you've pointed this out, and it's really unfortunate that you're the ones, and everybody in that group are the ones who are going to suffer because Dublin had this advantage in the Super 8s. But we'll fix that next year.
Yeah, and I think there is kind of an active pursuit of finger pointing here. Who is to blame for this is a lot of people's mentality at the moment. And in actual fact, I'm not sure who you can blame for this, if there is anybody to blame, because ultimately this was a very complex motion at a Congress. It was one of over 50 motions at Congress 2017. It was a footnote, it was a small detail, it was a thing that wasn't debated at all, this little part of a motion, and you had to say yes or no to the motion as a whole.
Yeah.
Now, Martin Breheny is writing in the Irish Independent today saying, the inside story of the irony behind the Donegal officials who voted for the very rule they're trying to oppose. Those Donegal officials voted for the Super 8s. Were they aware of this footnote regarding Croke Park? They probably should have been.
One of them was actually proposing the motion on behalf of the GAA. Mm-hmm. He was part of the overall GAA body. It was his job to say, this is a really good motion, everybody needs to get behind it, come on. So he wasn't there. He was literally doing exactly what you're supposed to do in that circumstance, taking off his Donegal hat and saying, on the whole, this is going to be good for football. Now, that's debatable. That will ultimately be debatable, and we'll see. But as a staging post to a better system, Super 8 is obviously going to produce a bunch of really good games over the next while.
I would have voted yes for the advice from Donegal. No question about it.
For the Super 8s generally?
Yeah, if I knew that this situation was going to come up, I'm like, do I want the opportunity to play 3 games in a round-robin system and have the unfairness of having to go to Croke Park? Yeah, I'm probably going to take that instead of the one situation of the quarterfinals, because I am from an elite county, aka Donegal. I will probably be taking part in these quarterfinals. This whole 3-game system will benefit me in my county. I'm voting yes. Those Donegal officials did the right thing. And now they're saying, well, actually, there's a little part of the thing we voted yes for that's not right. But ultimately, if you wanted to fix that, then you would have had to vote no. You wouldn't have had your 3 games this year. The Super 8s would have got backdated to the point where we wouldn't see them until next summer at the very earliest. You would have had to vote against the entire thing to vote against this little thing. And that's the thing that's really angering me around the discourse about this. It's like, well, why didn't you vote no against the Super 8s? It's like, because the Super 8s are brilliant by and large. And now we're at the point where we've got the one negative that has been confirmed this week.
Okay, let's not rehash the entire Super 8 debate. There's definitely a better system out there, but as a staging post, maybe this...
Well, from a Donegal perspective is what I mean.
Okay, let's bring you the back of the Times Ireland edition. Donegal will not boycott Croke Park. This is obviously the interviews that Michael Murphy was doing yesterday at the golf when he was having the crack. Kane fit, but Vardy a doubt for Sweden tie. Vardy was too knackered to take a penalty and now he's injured, but I bet you he'll be fine if he's called upon with about 10 minutes to go. If Harry Kane goes down, suddenly Jamie Vardy's injured. He's like, I'm miraculously recovered. But he was injured. He got a kick. But he was sore. He's too sore to take a penalty. It's not that he bottled taking a penalty. He definitely did not bottle taking a penalty. He was injured. Shut up. He was injured.
Yeah.
Screw you, Owen. He was injured.
Well,
Who are you to cast aspersions on Jamie Vardy's bottle?
Well, Jamie Vardy has got a huge bottle. He's won a Premier League title, Ger. I'm not sure if you know that. Did you know that? He was one of the best players in the Leicester City jersey that season.
Good partier. Bit
Great
racist.
Partier. Yeah, bit of a nasty man, to be quite honest.
Ring of Fire. Somebody made a joke about diarrhea and Ring of Fire, and I've never really been able to listen to that song ever since. But Ring of Fire, rampant rebels prove too hot for Tim to handle. What is this? Anyway, okay. It's not really fair, is it?
Cork hammer Tipperary last night in the hurling match. Sure.
223 to 113 was the score, and I don't know if you remember, but it's about 18 months ago that we were doing all these pieces about the dire future for Cork hurling, and then they won Munster. It was like, but that was a one-off, right? It was a very weak Munster last year. None of those teams performed really well, and other sides had other things to concentrate on. It was like, and then all of a sudden it's back-to-back. The under-21s are destroying a good, strong tip team who came through the semi-final with a great performance. And those kind of underage grades where they were winning loads of stuff, you start to put this package together and it's like, Cork are back, baby.
Yeah, Cork are back. It's it's going to be great scenes for the next few years. If that's like if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into the Cork succeeding, which I think we all should be. I think it's great to have like the most populated hurling strongholds doing well. It's good for the game. It's good for everybody. They're always an attractive outfit. They've got a brand new stadium to play in. It's going to be a great few years for them. They're going to go on a journey like the team at the start of this decade did with the Sean O's and the Donalogues.
The game was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh last night.
It's probably got a home away arrangement. I presume.
Yeah. But okay. Is the manager called Ring? What's the Ring of Fire?
Well, while you're figuring that out, I'm not sure. Will I just like start going on a monologue or something
about how Cork? You actually secretly love Cork.
Well, no.
All these years you've been growing up as
I think
a Kerry fan, you feel like you have this kind of, you need them to beat on all the time because it gives you self-esteem early in the season when you need it.
Pretty much, yeah. It's an inferiority complex, sure. It's like I don't feel happy about myself unless we're beating Cork by 24 points.
It's a superiority complex, really. If we're being accurate about this, it's a superiority complex.
Yeah, well, like as long as Cork just focus on the hurling forever, I'm happy with that. My favourite hurling team.
Well, they kind of are at the moment. If the footballers' performance against Kerry this year was anything to go by, what? So we'll see against Tyrone at the weekend. We're going to talk about that game with Enda McGinley a little bit later on. Let's bring you the Irish Times sports section this morning. England may fear nobody, but nobody fears England. This is a point that Emma Malone is making, and it's a well-made point that this whole "it's coming home" is all well and good, except that England aren't that good. Like, that's the other thing that has to be remembered here. They might scrape through against Sweden, and then if Russia/Croatia, probably Croatia, get them in the semi-finals, Croatia will be like, this is amazing. This is exactly what we wanted. We wanted your England team who have no midfield, who actually look a bit dodgy from set pieces, defending them a bit.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. I think England are losing in the semi-finals to Croatia. I think it's I think that is the populist view, isn't it? Except for the media that we often consume via Sky Sports News and everything in the UK. Our view has definitely been coloured by that. It's been coloured quite a bit by odds and stuff, given the amount of money going on in England, which is quite strange. Given the fact that I would say they're almost dead certs to lose in the World Cup semi-final. I would be shocked if they beat Croatia. This England team is far, far inferior to that Croatia team. The only thing that can save England now is if Russia managed to take Croatia all the way to penalties and beat them, because this England team is better than that Russia team.
Yeah. I mean, they would love to get Russia in the semis, I think. The other story on the front of the Irish Times is Barcelona chief denies he bought liver for Abidal. So Sandra Rosell has had to deny reports that he illegally bought a liver for Eric Abidal 6 years ago. You might remember Eric Abidal, the French defender who played for Barcelona. They had found a tumour on his liver, and then he had to have a liver transplant. A Spanish newspaper has claimed that phone calls intercepted by police. Why were they intercepting Sandra Rosell's phone calls in the first place? But anyway, show Rosell implicitly admitting he bought an illegal liver for the player who was found to have a tumour in his liver in 2011. Had the transplant in 2012, and Abidal says it was actually donated by his cousin. So that is the weirdest story I've heard involving a footballer in a long time.
It's utterly bizarre. It's like what can you even say about that? It's a football official has been accused of buying an organ. There's no real discussion about that, except for the fact that
you hope it's not true.
You hope it's not true. And if it is true, it's just like, imagine the process of that. Like, is there a black market or something for that sort of stuff? Clearly there is.
Yeah.
If there's an accusation, there must be some sort of endpoint to which this medium in Spain is linking him with. And is it the dark web? Is it like a dark alley somewhere in Barcelona?
A brilliant film made about it a couple of years ago. I say a couple of years ago, it's probably about 8 years ago now, which I will remember the name of as soon as I get a chance to Google it, which is just all about how there are people trapped in poverty, and they or there are people who are smuggled, and ultimately to get into certain countries they give up an organ, or they give up relatives' organs to do it, and it's pretty grim. So the Racing Post, Rule 4, bookmakers told to play fair or face intervention. And then obviously rewriting history, 3 lines 9 to 20 to enjoy a rare taste of Swede success. So 2-1 on basically is what England are ahead of the Sweden game.
I think they list their record against Sweden on the back of the Racing Post there. I didn't realise it was so poor competitively. I think they've beaten them once.
Played 8, won 1. Drawn 5, lost 2. So it's not disastrous. But
you like when you're ranking the
draw full time, draw extra time, someone to go through on penalties. Draw full time, extra time. That is my bet. Offtheball.com/boilsports for our specials on that.
I don't know about that. I think this England team is far superior to that Sweden team.
I might just actually check that with it. Yeah, so Neymar to score first is 5-1. That's an enhanced price exclusive to Off the Ball listeners and users. Offtheball.com/boilsports. Neymar to score first is 5-1, and they'll match your bet up to 50 quid if you're a new customer.
On the back page of the Herald, it's Michael Murphy being quoted saying, "See you in Croker. Donegal captain is ready to play the Dubs at HQ." We've also got Jose Mourinho saying Neymar, Maguire, one of the worst divers. So Jose Mourinho's come out to criticise Harry Maguire about his flop the last day against...
Is he doing that in Russia today, or is he finished his pundit?
For Russia Today, yeah. He's been speaking as an analyst for Russia Today. He says, speaking as an analyst for Russia Today, said the Burnley defender and his English teammates were just as guilty as Brazilian star Neymar. I presume the Everton defender. It's a strange one. I don't see the motive for Russia Today or for Jose Mourinho to actually be defending Neymar, but then maybe that's just my own paranoia. Whenever I see anybody quoted in Russia Today, I'm like, what's the motive here? What's the real story here? Why is Neymar being defended? Maybe it's just an honest opinion from Jose Mourinho. And I see Brazilian Ronaldo has come out to actually defend Neymar as well. Although Mateus has come out to criticise him, so I think there's a mixture of views on all of this. Rory's worry is the back page of the Irish Daily Mail. McIlroy admits career needs 5th major win, and Donegal officials to meet with GAA bosses. There's that story we were chatting about a little bit earlier on.
Just that picture on the back of that's Shane Lowry and Michael Murphy, aka John Ram.
Yeah, he looks very like John Ram there, doesn't he?
Just spotted, has the exact same body shape. They're about the same height. John Ram might even be an inch taller. Is Murphy 6'4", 6'5"?
I'm not sure. The exact same body shape is a bit harsh on Michael Murphy.
We've missed the opportunity of a lifetime to get the two lads together, kind of just a photograph.
You just need Michael Murphy to have sideburns and they would look quite alike. But I would say Michael Murphy is a far more fine-tuned athlete than John Ram is.
Murphy could travel around the golf courses of America putting on his bad American accent and going, yeah, I'm John Ram.
Or maybe a Spanish accent.
No, John Ram speaks
Does he?
Yeah, because he's been in college since he was
good point.
15, 16 in America.
He's still got a bit of the twang though.
You could definitely pigeon it up enough. Yeah, just from Pebble Beach. Yeah, John Ram's coming. John Ram. He's a little less tan than I thought.
And he's got... Yeah, that'd be an interesting kind of hidden camera documentary.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michael Murphy and I'm going to pretend to be a different sports person. So it's how all great shows start. On the back page of The Sun, it's Harry's game. Maguire, this is England's best ever chance to win a major tournament. And that's what you think is Grankvist's thoughts there. I'm not sure if that's actual real thoughts. Does Grankvist actually speak to The Sun and say, I was thinking earlier on, that's what you think, and they've quoted him as such. I presume that's how it works.
Speaking of players playing other sports, no doubt Paul Rouse will have been very interested by what was going on the Irish Open Twitter account yesterday. That's assuming that, of course, that he stays on as the Offaly football manager, because Shane Lowry turns out is bloody good at football. Have a look. Crossbar challenge, football and golf. Oh! A very muted, typical golf crowd. As opposed to that should be top off. Look at what I just did.
I think the golf crowd were just horrified by the fact that they were using rugby posts with which to do the GAA challenge. And it was just kind of like a mix between rugby posts and GAA posts. They were the proper width to be GAA posts and the crossbar was low enough, but then they had the pads on the posts. So.
All right. I missed that.
I'm sure an educated crowd like that have at the Irish Open were just horrified by that, and
they play a good bit of rugby in Donegal.
Oh, they do, yeah, without question. They also do an awfully. On the back page of the Irish Daily Star, it's Sweden taunt arrogant England. So this is Andreas Grankvist once again saying that I read something about that, which is England potentially coming a cropper in Samara on Saturday. Something about 99 times out of 100 they would beat us. Well, it's fun for England to have that sort of confidence. Let's play the game and see how things go. We know Sweden usually play well against England. We have good results against them. So to me, it doesn't really matter. So there's confident words coming out from Andreas Granqvist and the Sweden camp. And you've also got Donegal showdown there on the top left of that Irish Daily Star back page. On the back page of the Mirror then, here's a story we'll get into in a couple of moments. It's Karius as a keeper, Klopp to retain German as Anfield #1 despite Champions League flop, while success not a major worry for McIlroy. And then a couple of the UK back pages. Let's show you the front page of the Daily Telegraph sports section this morning. It's Wimbledon Brits fly the football flag. And on the back page...
My favourite story about other sports not giving a shit about other sports. So obviously the World Cup final's on while Kerry are playing Galway.
Yeah.
You're going to miss that?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be at Kerry Galway.
Yes.
Donaghy was saying, look, I mean, for Kerry and Galway people, ultimately, the World Cup, it's great, it's nice and everything, but there's only one show in town. At Wimbledon, when England are playing at 3 o'clock on Saturday, 0 TVs will have access to anything other than the tennis. There will be no football at Wimbledon. You'll have a bunch of people like... probably on their phones, but Saturday afternoon, I don't know if you know this, is like the bit where they invite all the other sports people to come and sit in the crowd. So no football, no people. Will no people show up, or will there just be that little subset of people who are like, I like tennis, football's bullshit?
I'm sure there is, and I'm sure there's people who are there for the strawberries and cream. They're not there for the sport at all, and they will be in the crowd. So that's actually how you filter out who are the real sports fans at Centre Court. The ones that are there, that's who. There's no real sports fans at Centre Court in Wimbledon, unless they've got a particular affiliation with whoever is actually playing. For, I don't know, countryman or woman potentially, I don't know. But that's my conspiracy. I'm thinking, if I'm David Beckham, for example, and I've got an invite to Wimbledon on Saturday, I'm not going. Of course I'm not going.
You show up and you're like, you get a little bzz anytime there's something that you need to watch, and you watch it and you put it back in. It's like... Also, you're David Beckham, you know. And
then after the buzz, it's just like, I don't know, Marion Cilic roaring at you from the base of the court saying, what the hell are you doing with your phone on, mate?
He's like, I'm David Beckham. Yeah, Screw you, Marion.
And England are 1-0 up, Marion. On the back page of The Guardian, it's time to believe. England's hope rooted in humility and focus.
We're so humble. Screw you, we're the most humble team in the world. What was, who was that story about?
Jordan Pickford. He's a cheery Jordan Pickford works out during a recovery session after his heroics at the weekend. Let's show you the back page of the UK Mirror as well this morning. Garrett's Ghostbusters. If you want to end your shootout curse and beat your bogey team, Sweden, who are you going to call? Garrett's Ghostbusters, that's who. They're going to exorcise the ghosts of the past, I believe, is what they're going to do.
I mean, mostly apart from the cocaine headline, it's been quite enjoyable stuff from the British media.
Yeah, that stuff that's all good-natured fun and hashtag bants. And the cocaine stuff was rather grim.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was no karma for that in the end. That's all I was thinking when Mina scored that header the other day. I was like, this is karma for the Sun, for that front page. And sure enough, it wasn't. Sure enough, it didn't pay off for them in the end. There was no karma.
We didn't talk about the Meath Miners the other night, who unfortunately got beaten by Wicklow, right?
Shock.
Wicklow beat them.
Yeah.
Now, Wicklow was not entirely rubbish because they'd beat Dublin. Meanwhile, Dublin were racking up like a 600-point win against Westmeath, right? Meath were in there's group stages in the Leinster Minor Football Championship. Meath were already through by virtue of the fact that they'd won their first 3 games. And so they didn't need a result against Wicklow. Wicklow, on the other hand, needed to win against Meath to knock the Dubs out. Very helpfully, Meath made a raft of changes to their team, giving lads in the panel who have been loyal servants all year to the Royal County an opportunity to get out there and show their stuff. Unfortunately, they lost. Leinster Minor Championship round 5, full-time, Meath 1-8, Wicklow a goal and 10.
Meath did everything short of putting Tommy Rooney in there and saying, oh, listen, you've got a fella who's 10 years over age. You're going to have to forfeit that game.
I've never seen Tommy so delighted. He had tweeted in his half-asleep state with a winky smiley face after the result came through, and then hastily deleted it in case anybody would have some... he's denying this, but I definitely saw it. I wish I'd screen grabbed it.
No, it was the eyes to the side emoji.
Oh. Yeah.
Conspiratorial tone,
yeah.
Basically.
He's denying that though, because when I went back to find it the next day, it had gone, and it was just a factual result. In case anybody be suspicious of Meath GAA's motives in knocking Dublin out in the Minor Football Championship.
You know, it's revenge for the Dublin dominance at senior level for the last couple of years.
I mean, it's a grotesque perversion of the integrity of the competition, which is what we're all supposed to say in circumstances like this.
Will you talk about Kylian Mbappe?
Yeah.
So Kylian Mbappe, we've been. The question has done the rounds.
Hang on, I need to go back to this.
Oh, sorry, we need to come back.
Finally,
to this.
No, go back.
Oh,
sorry.
go back.
Okay. We screwed
alert.
that one up. Yeah. Interesting ramifications for me is defeat to Wicklow tonight meant both teams got through and Dublin knocked out. There it is. It was from the off the ball. He's using company accounts to further his own political ends there. Me that won their 4 previous rounds before tonight. Eyes to the side emoji.
That's usually kind of like a sliding into your DMs emoji. It's not. Like that's what I would have thought that would have been used for.
Is that what you normally? That's how you have access to that. How often do you kids slide into DMs these days?
Well, I've never slid into anybody's DMs. Like, why would you slide into somebody's DMs? It's weird. But if you were to do that, it would be inappropriate to not use that emoji.
That's not how life works these days. You don't.
Yeah, I'm not one of those. I'm not down with the kids.
Right.
Tommy, on the other hand, after using an emoji like that.
How do people slide into your DMs?
No.
All right. I thought
it's really no. I don't know on what platform people slide into DMs. Is it? I presume it's like Instagram or something. I don't think it's a very Twitter thing to do.
Yeah, it's Instagram. Tommy's going. Yeah, it's Instagram. Yeah, he's like,
wouldn't be a massive Instagram user, to be quite honest.
Wouldn't be on Twitter, no.
Maybe. No. Like you'd need to have a bigger following than I would. Do people slide into your DMs?
Yeah, but like in a we have this thing going on. Can you retweet, please? I'm like, oh god, yeah, okay.
That's how it starts. Will we talk about Kylian Mbappe?
That's how it starts.
We've got a great event this weekend. It'd be great if you could give us some coverage. So Kylian Mbappe, the question was posed, is he joining Real Madrid?
People are sliding into his DMs.
Jeff Gillingham quote tweeting Baptiste Ripard saying that Real Madrid, this is yesterday, had reportedly agreed a €272 million deal with PSG to sign Kylian Mbappe, set to be paid over 4 instalments, reported by Ripard, who's also correct about Griezmann's renewal and Neymar joining Atletico. Amazing if true. So we thought a fee had been agreed after that, but then we changed our mind after seeing this statement by Real Madrid. This is not how they wrote it. This is Google Translate doing a pretty bad job. Given the information published in the last hours referring to an alleged agreement between Real Madrid and PSG by Mbappe, Real Madrid says they are flatly false. Real Madrid has not made any offers to PSG or the players and regrets the dissemination of this type of information that is not contrasted with the parties. So flat refusal, flat denial from Real Madrid. They also did the same thing just 2 days previously when they said, in light of information broadcast by TVE regarding an alleged Madrid offer to PSG and their player Neymar, Real Madrid wishes to state that this information is absolutely untrue. Madrid has made no offer of any kind to PSG or the player. They are surprised by the Spanish public television network would choose to broadcast entirely false information without anyone from the outlet having first contacted any of the parties concerned to corroborate the supposed information, which would have been quite easily discredited. Now, we straight up believe this. We were like, well, Real Madrid have denied this. This has to be true. There is clearly nothing going on here between Mbappe and Real Madrid, or indeed between Neymar and Real Madrid. And then we remembered this in April 2003. This is a statement released by Real Madrid saying, surrounding the speculation regarding the supposed interest from Real Madrid in signing David Beckham, the club wishes to communicate that no contact has existed between the clubs. Neither directly or indirectly has there been any contact between Madrid and Beckham. Despite the speculation surrounding the issue, they have no intention of negotiating the transfer of Mr. Beckham. Spoiler alert, here's what happened 2 months later. Beckham joins Real Madrid, of course, on the 18th of June 2003. He has agreed a 4-year contract with Real Madrid. Let's also remind ourselves what happened with Ronaldo in August 2002. The deal collapsing there significantly between Real Madrid and Inter Milan for a deal from this Brazilian World Cup star Ronaldo. So Ronaldo, of course, stayed at Inter Milan, didn't he? Oh wait, no he didn't. Here's what happened a couple of months later. Real Madrid swoop for Ronaldo. They've added to their star-studded lineup by finalising a deal for the transfer of Ronaldo from Real Madrid. So basically, we can believe that we can believe nothing when it comes to Mbappe and Neymar. The statements released by Real Madrid should basically have included a little asterisk saying this could all be nonsense.
Mbappe and Neymar would cost about 500 million combined in signing fee.
Yes.
Like spread over a bunch of years, so not really, right? But they could get 100 million quid as the fee that Real Madrid are seeking from Juventus for Ronaldo. Mm-hmm. He was obviously at the end of his career. Probably going to be good for another 2 or 3 seasons, but at the same time, Kylian Mbappe could be good for 10/15 seasons. And they could probably get 120, maybe 180 million for Gareth Bale from Real Madrid or from Manchester United. So all of a sudden, you've replaced those 2 players for your entire outlay of this year. Not very much.
No, it's true, and you've got this whole new brand of Galacticos. You think the thing is getting stale. We've won a load of Champions Leagues in a row. It's getting boring now. We're too successful. How do we make things more exciting for everybody? And it's sign a load of players, just throw the blueprint out the window.
Do Neymar and Mbappe play well together for PSG?
I wouldn't necessarily say that they've got the biggest chemistry from it. Like, we were only watching them in the Champions League, and even to that point, we missed Neymar in the latter stages of the Champions League because of that injury. So we've only had one season to see it. We all know how Neymar and Cavani, how they kind of refuse to cooperate at certain points of the season. We know that individually they're amazing players, and ultimately they're on opposite wings. Like, there is no sort of kind of centre midfield partnership there. They're kind of hugging touchlines to a certain extent away from each other. But I would imagine that Mbappe in particular would be happy to step out of the shadow of Neymar. If you had to pick one or the other, you've got to sign Neymar in that situation. Just another piece of transfer news for you this morning, and it's, as we mentioned on the back page of the Mirror, that Karius is a keeper. It's bad news for Liverpool fans, I think, that Klopp is going to retain him. He's prepared to back the Champions League fall guy, reports the Mirror this morning. Just going to turn inside to tell you that Liverpool... that Jurgen Klopp has come out and says he insists that there is no keeper currently available who he rates higher, despite the fact that Liverpool have already been priced out of moves for Atletico Madrid's Jan Oblak and Roma's Alisson, of course, who's playing with Real Madrid at the moment. The other options we're talking about in the Mirror this morning are Barcelona's Jasper Cillessen and Kasper Schmeichel as well, and Pavlenka as well from Werder Bremen. So he essentially rates Loris Karius higher than that. Pre-season is starting soon, and it looks like Karius is going to stay with Liverpool. And another man who's come back into our lives this week, really, ahead of...
Karius was concussed, so it's totally fair. Like, he was concussed. They should have got him off.
Well, science is going to save Loris Karius in the situation. It's as simple as that. He gets one more chance because of this concussion ruling, which was, like, it's a story that we haven't given enough credit to for the bizarre nature of it all, really. It's absolutely mad, given how heavily lambasted Loris Karius was, and to a couple of days later this story coming out, and we had the World Cup to distract us from this.
Yeah.
Like, let's just pause for a moment and appreciate how crazy it was that a keeper saw pretty much the majority of a Champions League final out while being concussed.
Yeah, not right.
Sven-Goran Eriksson is back in the news. He's talking up Sweden's chances against England at the weekend. We were just sitting around on our hands basically waiting for Sven to come out and talk about this. He says it's going to be the most difficult game so far for England. They can bet on that. It will be easier for England to beat Brazil than to beat Sweden, in my opinion, he says. Really? Would England really take Brazil over Sweden at this point?
No.
Probably not. He does talk a little bit of sense. He says Sweden will be more or less the same as Iceland in Euro 2016. They don't have the best footballers in the world, and none of our players will play in the first team of the biggest clubs in the world since Zlatan left. But as a team, they work together. They're one of the best. You won't find a better team. Sweden are champions of team spirit, which sounds like a patronising kind of line towards a team who've already lost the match. But no, Sven-Goran Eriksson is very confident. He can be confident because he got Emil Forsberg, who wrote this piece on the Players' Tribune last week, which kind of went under the radar. Now, he says, the only time I get nervous in football is after I play a bad game, because when he gets home at night, he knows what's coming. A meeting with the sheriff. And let me tell you, it can be brutal. The sheriff always gives it to me straight. You were a disaster. Where were you? Why didn't you make that run? Do you call that a corner? Seriously? Seriously? And if the sheriff gets really pissed off, well, you don't want to be in the same room. Trust me, I know, because I know the sheriff better than anyone. After all, she is my wife. It's, as I say, something that's kind of flown under the radar. Shanga Forsberg is the wife of Emil Forsberg, who happens to be a professional footballer, I think for Leipzig as well, but also for the Swedish national women's team.
Are their kids going to be footballers, do you think?
I would say so.
I would be tiger parented.
It sounds like there's one particularly pushy parent there. Although the thing is, he actually has her to thank for a lot of his career. They met when they were 14, and she was like the pushy girlfriend at the time, and wasn't. Emil Forsberg was a very quiet guy and wasn't getting in the team. And his agent and his girlfriend really pushed him to the point where he is today, to the point where they're going to end the process of football coming home, I fear.
Okay, let's move on to Gaelic football. We will talk Gaelic football with Enda McGinley and Niall McCoy in just a minute. First, Michael Murphy at the Irish Open. Here's what he had to say about the whole fact that Donegal are going to be playing Dublin at Croke Park.
Obviously, in terms of the Super 8s, they're coming up. First of all, you've won your Ulster Championship back this year. It's been a good start for Donegal.
It has been. It has been quite positive. I suppose after the disappointment of the National League, we've I suppose getting relegated in the National League, we've really picked things up now. So it's just been, I suppose, fantastic for the younger lads to experience an Ulster Championship. I suppose win, and then for all of us the older lads, I suppose, to feel it, I suppose, after a number of years out. But yeah, looking forward to getting into the Super 8s now, and the concept of off it and getting stuck into it.
Declan Bonner was on off the ball last Friday. He brought up the point about Croke Park being the venue for the first game against Dublin. As players, have you paid any attention to what's happened over the last 3-4 days?
No, as I said, I suppose it's a new concept, it's a new tournament, the Super 8s. I suppose there's going to be things, I suppose, ironed out over this year and over the coming years, and like anything that's new, there's always improvements that can be made to it. But as I seen the way the hurling one ran off, it was fantastic. There was really, really close games, there was brilliant venues, there was huge crowds there, so I think the Super 8s in football can really run off just as well, and we're looking forward as a team to be one of the Super 8s competing in it.
As captain though, do you feel it's fair to have to play Dublin in Croke Park and for them to have a second game there as well?
Well, I suppose the first group of games, as far as I'm aware, really looking at this morning, is our Croke Park games. So that's set in stone. That's been passed in Congress where everyone has been at. I think it's just the games thereafter what I suppose everybody is trying to wonder and get their head around. But I think as the weeks pass, it will iron out. And I think, I suppose, as the year passes too, they'll look at ways and improving and tweaking it if need be. But at the moment, as a group of players, you're just so excited to get stuck into it as a Super 8 and to get stuck into it as a team, and that's what we'll do.
Are you looking forward to obviously 3 very competitive games coming up?
Yeah, you would have to assume so anyway, for based on what we have. We know at the moment one of our oppositions in Dublin, and I suppose that's all we can prepare for now, and depending on how the results go this weekend, we'll know them thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that game is going to be at Croke Park and everybody knows that, but fair play to Donegal for fighting the good fight.
I've no idea why we want to get John Ram's take on the Dublin-Donegal situation.
All right, let's move on. Enda McGinley is on the line. Niall McCoy is with us as well. Good morning, lads. How you doing?
Good morning, man.
Not too bad, folks.
And I'm going to start with you and talk a little about the qualifier record of Kieran McGeeney. It's somebody who you obviously would have come up against in your own playing career. Geezer has this weird reputation really as a manager where people kind of query his success, and yet we've done this graphic and stuck it out over social over the last 24 hours or so, but his record in the qualifiers is one of the best records of any manager in any sport in the world. If we were just playing qualifiers, everybody would say he is a phenomenal manager. The win ratio is 86%. It's 25 wins from 29. One of those was the games that they didn't win was a draw against Antrim in 2010. The other ones were 3 defeats. Why is Kieran McGeeney such a good manager in the qualifiers?
Yeah, good question, because his record in Ulster is 0%, which the difference there is unbelievable. So, and that's not against. He's played down and Fermanagh, for example, in Ulster, where really he Armagh would have been favourites coming into both them games, and yet suffered losses. So his record in the qualifiers is something else. But I think it's as much how a team approaches the qualifiers. I think an awful lot of them, sort of Division 3, Division 4 sides, even some of the Division 2 sides, they have no real aspirations from what I can see whenever they go into the qualifiers. And I think we've seen that this year again, that there's been a lot of pretty poor performances, if truth be told, in the qualifiers. And I think if teams don't really fully embrace it, then they're going to be easily taken care of. I think whenever a team gets defeated in their provincial championship, they can be completely flat. And if they are completely flat and have no real aspirations, well, then they're going to get beat. I know for Tyrone, Mickey Hart probably has a right good record in the qualifiers as well. Now, we would be a strong team, so you'd be expected to come through it. But again, we had full aspirations of still doing something at the latter stage. So McGeeney somehow must have been able to instill in that Armagh squad that no matter about the provincial loss, that they still were able to actually do something that year. And if they have that confidence, then they go in hungry into them games and they move on. What he's done this year after Fermanagh, and it's pretty clear, he's come out a couple of times, he has used all the criticism, the very valid criticism to be fair, after the Fermanagh defeat, and he's used that in the good old-fashioned sense to get the wagon circled up, and away they've went. And they've had relatively favourable draws in the qualifiers. Again, there's a lot of teams in there. I think they've played Sligo and Westmeath. Westmeath were in a poor way of going. Sligo weren't exactly pulling up trees this year either, so that's been a lovely progress for them. And it's funny up here, the discourse from the Armagh sort of public is that Roscommon's a perfect draw for them, because it's a good test to see if they're ready or not for the qualifiers. Because if they got another easy team, they'd be thinking we could go into the qualifiers or the Super 8s and get hammered in 3 by 3 big teams, whereas Roscommon they're seeing as sort of that almost top tier team. So if they can take Roscommon, they'll feel very worthy that Super 8 berth. So Armagh have regained huge confidence and are now facing the toughest draw of this round of the qualifiers with significant confidence.
Niall McCoy of Gaelic Life, what's your take on the whole McGeady phenomenon? Trying to just thinking about it, obviously his desire for his teams to be super fit, that benefits the qualifiers and the routine of week on, week out games. So maybe there's some kind of sense of benefit there. And then the other thing is mindset, and like his own mindset as a player obviously is something that he has somehow been able to transmit to his teams, but just in this exclusive window of time when the qualifiers are on.
Yeah, and that is counted that Laois defeat. There's only one loss after the whole substitution debacle in 2016 anyway. Armagh boys had a good qualifier record. I think, they were going through the front door most of the year since 2001, but 2007 was the first year they would have lost 2 games in a row. They lost in Ulster up in Donegal, and then they lost out to Derry and Clonus. They just always sometimes they seem to drift away when it comes to the qualifiers, but Armagh boys sort of give it a good rattle, and suppose Kieran still continuing that condition. I agree at the end of there. I do think Roscommon is probably the ideal draw. People were looking Laois because it would have been on paper the easiest, but Laois have been a bit of a bogey team. But Roscommon are a big physical team. They're the sort of team that should tell us a lot more where Armagh are at, and it's very hard to judge where Armagh are at. Their first 11 games in league and championship this year were against Division 3 opposition. They played Clare, who are obviously Division 2, and they very nearly exited the competition. So it's a real step up. It'll tell us where they are. It'll tell us a lot about this team. And as Enda said, it's a sort of match, if you did get through playing Laois and went into the last 8 in a group that could essentially be Derry or Dublin, Donegal and Tyrone. Looking at what happened last year against Tyrone, you could be in big trouble. So I'm glad it's Roscommon. I see it as a fairly 50-50 game. It's a game that can win. But as I say, Armagh at the moment is just very hard to judge. But McGinley has sort of rallied the troops, and he does take a lot of the flack off the players, as we saw after the Fermanagh match. He is very quick to divert the criticism onto himself, what he has done after defeats ever since he's been there. They showed a lot of fight back against Clare to hit 1-5 without replay. It was more Clare claps maybe than Armagh winning, but they're still there, and it's been 2005 and 2006 since Armagh last reached consecutive All-Ireland quarter-finals. So that in itself, if to get past Roscommon, is an achievement.
Now, he's got a relatively spiky relationship with the media, and it's unfortunate because certainly any of the conversations you'd have with him down the years, they're always interesting. He always has an interesting take on the general state of the game, the state of the coverage of the game, and everything in between. How has his relationship been over the last kind of 18 months? Because he did come out and very sternly round on the critics after the Clare game, and it's hard to know if he had a point. I'm not reading enough of the local press and the local coverage of him.
I'd be more interested in his relationship with the fans, because I thought it was quite interesting that he came out and took issue with the fans that left the match early and said just to have some faith in the boys. I was speaking to Jim McCoy during the week, and he was saying it had shades in 1993 when they had that famous fight back against Fermanagh when they had 3 goals in the last few minutes, and McCarry managed that team, and McGeady would have been out with injury that day. And I'm more interested in that side of it. Like, what you're going to get as the media with McGeady. He, as you say, when you do get talking to him, he's absolutely first class, but he doesn't do it a whole pile, and that's just the way it is. That's the way he'll always be. He's not going to change that. But I think he would like to see a bit more sort of faith and support. Not all the Armagh fans, because they'll bring a big crowd wherever they went, but a lot left early against Clare. There's a lot of people in Armagh that he still has to win over. That's a fact. There's still a lot of people that aren't overly pleased with how things are going, which I find a bit harsh, especially when you're considering that he's basically working up around 8 players that would have featured against Tyrone and Kildare in them last couple of matches last year. So it's a very young team. He's calling for patience. It is a team that requires a bit of patience, and they're underdogs for a reason this weekend. So it'll just be interesting. Armagh will bring a huge support to O'Meara Park, but it'll just be interesting to see the reaction if they maybe get a difficult start, because I think that's quite a big possibility. Roscommon will really, really push them hard in the first few minutes, and Armagh have shown in recent years that when a team get a run on them, they do find it very difficult to stop them.
Enda, just to take that point from Niall on a little bit further then, if you look at like what he's done with Armagh over the past couple of years, you wouldn't necessarily say that they've overachieved, but as Niall says there, if they win this weekend, it'll be the first time they've reached back-to-back quarterfinals since 05 and 06. So that would constitute a big overachievement if you look at it in black and white terms, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Two quarterfinals back to back, coming from a team that's been in Division 3 would be very impressive. I was thinking back whenever Joe was asking Niall the question previously. Maybe the biggest difference is that pressure. Whenever the team's really under pressure and there's all the hype and the build up around a provincial championship tie, that's a huge difference to the back door, where essentially a team is forgotten and the spotlight is completely off the team. And maybe them Armagh players are more comfortable whenever there's slightly less pressure on them. And with McGinley, and we've seen it in Kildare too, McGinley's just one of them players that, because of his reputation as a player, because of what he done as a player, because of how he carries himself, he is a story all of his own. So that always follows Armagh around, and coming into the really big games, the big provincial championship games, then there's huge talk about that, and maybe that's a pressure that the team doesn't quite need. But in terms of overall progress, I suppose people are holding Kieran McGinley to a very high standard because of who he was and what he done as a player, as I said. And maybe the artillery isn't quite there in Armagh. There's some sort of issue with Crossmaglen, which hasn't helped, because bottom line, Crossmaglen's the strongest club, or the strongest pool of players in Armagh. Yes, they didn't win, or they've been just not as strong of late, but to have no Crossmaglen players on the team, and to have a history that there might be a bit of an issue between you and Crossmaglen, doesn't exactly bode well, and I think that has weakened them too whenever the team hasn't been going well.
Yeah, Roscommon are fairly strong favourites to win that game, and I can really you can understand that, certainly the background that they've come from, the success that they've had under Kevin McStay over the last while. I did want to move on and just ask a little bit about Fermanagh before we get into Tyrone. A lot of people are predicting that Fermanagh are going to shock Kildare this weekend, and that Kildare need to be wary after last week. But it wouldn't be that much of a shock if the team, which was so brilliant in Ulster all the way up to the Ulster final, puts in an excellent performance against the Kildare team, who've really put one really good performance out there against Mayo. It's just that the recency bias of that is making people assume that this is a foregone conclusion, and it doesn't have the bang of a foregone conclusion at all, Enda.
Yeah, it sort of has a mirror of the Cork and Tyrone game as well, and to a certain extent Laois and Monaghan. For a lot of these round 4 teams, we're not really quite sure where they're at. They have had some decent results this year, and then most of the teams have had some awful results this year. So for Fermanagh, they had that brilliant result against Monaghan. They had a very good result against Fermanagh, a very credible league campaign. So Fermanagh are probably one of the most consistent teams. Yes, they got a bad hammering in the Ulster final, but conceding the 2 sort of first half goals sort of finished that. Sort of opened up Fermanagh and meant that they had to come out. For Kildare, you're absolutely right. Kildare, how do we trust Kildare? They were on a 12-match losing streak. Now, they were physically strong and sort of bullied Derry out of the way, and I would fear that that's what might happen against Fermanagh this weekend. They were brilliant, obviously, against Mayo, but that's their one big performance, their one big win in over a year. Now, we'll see whether Cian O'Neill, having taken that stance and sort of led the county and got a county in behind him, whether he's able to build on that momentum now and push Fermanagh aside. They certainly will have a better quality side than Fermanagh, without a doubt. But Fermanagh will be really well organised. Kildare seem to have struggled with that style in the past against, obviously, Carlow this year. So yes, it will be a big test for Kildare. But if there's any sort of substance to Kildare, if there's any substance to this momentum that they've built, then they should be able to take care of Fermanagh. Because bottom line, Fermanagh, I heard from a relatively well-placed source that before the Ulster final against Donegal, Rory Gallagher, now probably it was tongue-in-cheek, but he pretty much had said in a wee offside remark, look, if we win the Ulster title, we'll phone up Croke Park and we'll say, no, play away with 7 in the Super 8s, because we're not interested. Fermanagh were only interested in that provincial title. They know that they're probably not at that Super 8 level, and they've no real interest in getting a number of hammerings, and the defeat to Donegal in the Ulster final would have only reinforced that deep-seated notion within themselves. So I think Fermanagh will struggle whenever the battle really comes on. I think Fermanagh will struggle in terms of their real belief and their real desire to actually make it to the Super 8, and I think Kildare should have that. Should have that, sorry.
No, just on that, I mean, as a Kildare supporter, you'd be a little bit concerned that the Stephen Poacher inspired Carlow performance is exactly what Kildare are going to face this weekend against Fermanagh, and as Enda pointed out, they didn't really know how to deal with it then. You'd hope that having come through that experience and maybe changed the team quite significantly in the meantime, that actually they would probably have learned enough, but you would be taking nothing for granted.
No, and you can maybe guarantee that Rory was possibly trying to get in touch with Turlock O'Brien or something this week, or he certainly would have watched a lot of videos from that match, because it's going to be a bit of deja vu. Fermanagh, for me, and is completely right. It was Ulster title for Fermanagh is just the holy grail at the moment, but I think Rory Gallagher is such a motivator now, such a player's manager, that he will be able to get them back up for this match, and I really foresee this being an extremely difficult match for Kildare, and I actually fancy Fermanagh to frustrate them enough to come through it. The one thing with Fermanagh's game plan is it's a bit like Donegal under Jim McGinley. It's about staying ahead and protecting the lead, and they didn't concede a goal against Armagh, didn't concede a goal against Monaghan, and they were able to get home. Once Donegal hit that first goal against them, you can near have blown the full time whistle then. So, but they've had a nice break since then. They've had enough time to regroup and recover, and while Kildare were able to come up to Derry and push them around, even though Derry kept many men back, this Fermanagh backline is set up a lot more. There's a lot more finesse in their defensive system at the moment, and I think they can keep Kildare to a very low score. I think they can get enough scores on the board to get over the line, and I think after the highs of the Mayo match, Kildare can hit the ground very quickly here.
All right, so you're actually predicting a Fermanagh win there. Now, just to get your thoughts briefly on the Cork-Tyrone game, are Tyrone just going to win this game before we get into the full analysis with Enda? Are they your prediction for that one?
Yeah, I can't see anything but a Tyrone win by 5 or 6 points. I think they'll get over the line. I don't think they've ever beaten Cork. I think they only played twice in the championship, but I don't foresee any major difficulties when push comes to the shove. All
right. Niall, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. That's Niall McCoy from Gaelic Life. You should check out their website, get your hands on an actual paper copy of the newspaper. It's great stuff. And let's move on then and talk about Cork and Tyrone. Just reading some of the pre-match press, there's like a sense that a lot of the Tyrone players didn't do themselves justice the last day out against Cavan. This is the qualifier, so that doesn't automatically mean that they're going to up their game, and it's hard to know whether or not the trend is their friend at the moment. What's your take?
Oh, absolutely. It is really hard to know where Tyrone's at. I was down at the Cavan match, and it was a real struggle. It was a struggle to watch as a supporter. It was a struggle to watch. Just there was so little sort of fluidity. There was so little real quality about Tyrone's playing. The first 20 minutes, they definitely were trying to hit the full forward line of Conor McCalliskey and Richard Donnelly, but the ball just, they may as well have been kicking it off a wall. It was coming out as fast as it went in. And then whenever that wasn't working for Tyrone, they reverted back to their plan A, which is running the ball, which is effective for them. But they were coming into a crowded Cavan defence, and so there was just that thing we see in the modern game that we all dislike, this sort of soloing on the spot and the lateral passes or the reverse passes under no pressure at all. And there was so little inventiveness from Tyrone to sort of break that down or to bring anything different to the game whenever the full forward proposition wasn't working for them. So that was a concern. They got lorded at midfield by Gearóid McKiernan. Now, Gearóid McKiernan on his day is a difficult handful for any team in the country. But Tyrone got beat in midfield with Gearóid McKiernan, and again that was a concern. In terms of defensively, Tyrone were still solid. Cavan were able to kick a couple of points from distance, but Tyrone were still solid. But Cavan, Cavan versus Down, Cavan were horrendous against Down, and they were horrendous against Donegal. So people were saying that the Tyrone-Cavan game should be very tight because they were giving Cavan the credit for winning division or coming through Division 2 and getting to Division 1. But Cavan in the championship has been pretty poor. So again, it's trying to think what level of team did Tyrone manage to beat. I think their Meath performance was great because Meath were on a real crest of the wave in that game, and there was a huge energy behind Meath in that game. But Tyrone have been trying so far this year to get a plan B, and it didn't seem to be working, and then Conor McAlliskey hit a brilliant vein of form in the early rounds of the championship, which he carried on to sort of the early part of Meath, but he has sort of went off the boil. And with Mark Bradley injured and Conor McAlliskey off the boil, we're back to try and sort of Ronan O'Neill again, and he's come up short a couple of times. And so Tyrone are still searching. They're still searching for this attack and play that they need if they're going to threaten the big teams, and to combine that with their decent defence and their very good counter-attacking game. But I'm just not convinced from what I've seen against Cavan.
Right, okay. Like, obviously, we don't want to look too far ahead. There could be, like, you can't really predict Cork either. They could well beat them at the weekend, and we might not be talking about this game. But ultimately, Mickey Harte does have, to a certain extent, think about the potential of facing Dublin in the Super Race. They will be playing them in Omagh if they win at the weekend. And ultimately, they need to be working on it now. I'm sure, as you say, they're working on the plan B, which isn't quite there, as you've said. They need to be working on it now, really, for it to be right for Dublin, despite the fact that fixture isn't even guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing Mickey Harte, he will always be one game at a time. It's always just the next game, and the next game is always the most important game. But deep down in Mickey Harte, he is always about winning the Sam Maguire, and he's always looking and working at his team to win Sam Maguire, even if the team would appear to many outsiders to not be, that they shouldn't even be thinking about that there. Mickey Harte will be thinking about the potential of taking down Dublin. And particularly from last year's All-Ireland semi-final, he'll have felt it was, and he came out and said it was just a day when everything sort of went wrong, and the early goals sort of scuppered their plans, and that they can still be competitive if they just tweak the plans a wee bit. He's been trying to tweak them plans, but I think he's been frustrated by maybe not having, by a few injuries that sort of have removed some of his options there, and then some players finding form and then losing form. And so his ability to try and formulate that second plan that I think he feels he needs to bring to the table against Dublin has been frustrated, and the qualifiers should give you that run to be able to develop that further. But to date, it hasn't really done that. But absolutely, I agree. He will have been thinking about Dublin and seeing now that you're potentially in the same half as Dublin in the Super 8s. Absolutely, that will be in the back of his mind. But Mickey will know about Cork. Our team always struggle, or my team, that team of the Naughties, always struggle against Cork. And whilst it's obviously two very different teams now, you don't sort of forget that. And Cork are unpredictable, and Cork don't fear Tyrone because they have a good record against us. So that them will be concerns. And again, Cork, Tipperary, they were a brilliant performance against Tipperary, hugely credible, and then horrible against Kerry. So what Cork's going to turn up, we don't really know, and Tyrone will be wary of them because Cork have tended in the past to turn up against Tyrone.
Just one last one before we let you go, and then it's on Laois versus Monaghan. Like, when you look at Monaghan, getting to an All-Ireland semi-final will be a step forward for them this year, and you feel that there is a huge opportunity for them this year, because if they get to the Super 8s, if they beat Laois at the weekend, which of course is another big if, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but their game in Croke Park will be against the winner of that Fermanagh against Kildare game. Again, they'll fancy themselves in, despite their record in Croke Park. And then they get a game up in Clones against, who's it going to be against? It's going to be against Kerry up in Clones if they get to the Super 8. So that's the one environment where they feel they could beat a team like Kerry, is up in Clones. And therefore, this is the one year where Monaghan could think, right, we can finally break our duck and finally get into the last four.
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. So Monaghan are a brilliant league team against any top team in the country. Monaghan in the league is a difficult proposition. Monaghan have always failed in that big championship game in Croke Park in the quarter-final stage, and now suddenly the quarter-final stage is actually a mini-league, which suits Monaghan down to the ground. And there is teams on their side that they will certainly, like Galway and Kerry, they're used to playing them teams in Division 1 and having an excellent record against them. So Monaghan will see a big opportunity. The difficulty for Monaghan will be that they have played Waterford and Leitrim to date in the back door. Now, whenever you get beat in the provincial championship, you want a chance to regroup. You want a chance for your players to gain confidence progressing through the back door. You want the team to be able to work on their systems. But Monaghan, having defeated Leitrim and Waterford, really, what will they have learned? Any player that has played well in them games, there will be a big asterisk beside that confidence, because they'll know they haven't really come up against anybody. So Fermanagh Monaghan won't have gained a huge amount in terms of development through the qualifiers, and they should again take care of Laois. Like, with Laois have had a very good year, but they're still a Division 4 side promoted to Division 3. It'll not be particularly easy for Monaghan, but you still expect Monaghan to come through. And again, they haven't really played anything of substantial quality then through the back door to prepare themselves for the Super 8. But with that, they'll know that the Super 8 this year, more than any of their previous quarter-final appearances, gives them a massive opportunity to reach the semi-final.
And great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
All right, man.
We'll look forward to those games a little bit more over the course of the next 24, 48 hours. So here on offtheball.com, check out all the stuff that we do as well. Now, a reminder that OTB AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Richard Cooper was back in studio with us earlier on this week. He brought Kevin Kilban with him all the way from Russia.
I think Kevin has a really hard time saying stuff, doesn't he, without actually smiling. You know, he's just always smiling, isn't he? Like, no matter what. I think he's always so nice about people that even if he was asked about like Donald Trump, he'd probably say, yeah, but you can see it from his point of view, though. You know, I think Trump's a bit. You know, I think he's been given too hard a time. I do.
He's just a very happy man. He lives a good life.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear him singing Sinn Féin or on the Féin, just in his accent, because I mean he used to sing all the.
He did.
You know,
he did. To be fair to him.
Sinn Féin fall. Till on the Grosta, till on tin a lot. They might go into sort of an Irish prayer or whatever.
He's a happy man despite the fact his heart is broken and Mayo are out of this tournament.
But still, he can probably understand it why they're out. You know, like why the opposition want to beat them. You know, because he's a fair bloke.
Kildare have done well.
Check out more from Richard, of course, on all of our social channels. You can get them youtube.com/offtheball or at offtheball on Twitter and Facebook as well. There you go.
There you go indeed, yeah.
I don't think that these games in the qualifiers, I don't know what to make of them. Heavy favourites in all of the games. Kildare are heavy favourites, Tyrone are heavy favourites, Monaghan are heavy favourites, and I'm just not sure that all of these games are going to go. Roscommon are pretty heavy favourites against Armagh as well. I don't know.
Yeah, like you look
no
at
upsets.
The thing is, you look at all the kind of underdogs there: Fermanagh, Cork, Armagh, and Laois. And ironically, three of them are provincial losers, like which is very unusual that they would be the three underdogs going into for these games. And you can see the potential. You can make a case for a shock in each and every one of those games. Now, that would suggest there is going to be one shock, and probably one shock only. And you look at it and you think Armagh's probably the more likely of all of them to actually.
Niall McCoy makes a very good case for Fermanagh. It's like the Kildare not that good against this style of defence already in the championship this season. Fermanagh better than the Carlow team who managed to beat Kildare. Kildare struggled through against Longford, who are no great shakes, and against Derry, who are in a bit of a crisis at the moment. And
the Carlow thing is the big worry for Kildare. The way that defence managed to gobble them up, and Fermanagh execute that even better than Carlow. So what's Cian O'Neill learned from that Carlow match in Tullamore will be the big question.
Yeah.
And we'll get an answer to that as we get. Like, is it actually a shock if Fermanagh beat Kildare? Like, I would say that's probably actually the most even line and when it comes to odds ahead of the weekend, Fermanagh versus Kildare. Is it unusual that it's in Navan? Is it, you know, like when it comes to travelling support and all that? Oh, you mean is it unfair that it's closer to Kildare than it is to... It's certainly closer to Newbridge than it is to Enniskillen. To Fermanagh, is it? Of course it is. It's literally a border county of Meath, isn't it? Kildare, you got to go through Dublin to get to Meath. No, around Maynooth there's like the three counties touch. Oh, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, is it about an hour to Navan? Is it about an hour and a half from Enniskillen? That extra half an hour can make all the difference, Ger. Yeah, it's a spiritual thing. You see everybody in the papers going, "Whoa, Kildare, you celebrating on the pitch, can't be doing that." That's like tempting fate there now. You big time Charlie's after that one win. Newbridge and Nowhere's great 1 week, but it's almost like you're the only one thinking this and everybody's thinking the same thing, so therefore everybody's thinking it. It's like, well, okay, it's not a surprise anymore that Fermanagh might have the ability to get the jump. Yeah, like... Without question. I think the celebration on the pitch, though, there was a sense that this could be the last time we get to celebrate in Conduits Park before the end of the year. Like, I'm sure that there was a realisation that... Well, now after we beat, who are we playing in if we win? Who are we playing in St. Conduits Park? Galway, I think, isn't it? Okay. Might be the last time we get to celebrate. Yeah. We all go away. Well, I mean, in terms of this weekend, I think there was a realisation that there was a strong provincial final loser coming down the track, so... You know,
right.
it's a good day out.
Let's go back to the World Cup. It is a day off, but let's go to Sochi and join Irish journalist Bryan MacDonald, who's over there to talk to us a little bit about the flowering of Russian and international relations in the aftermath of Russia hosting the World Cup. Bryan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, or double utra as we say over here.
There's a load of stuff I want to talk to you about. Let's talk about football in Sochi first and what the level of expectation of the actual Russian public is before we get into how the perception of the entire world seems to be changing on a day-by-day basis. First off, do Russia think they're going to win this game against Croatia?
Not really, no. But then again, Russia didn't think they'd win any of their games. So, I mean, I think there's some kind of virtue and pessimism over here.
Sochi is like incredibly hot. We've been kind of seeing that so far. So is it the type of place where there will be like hundreds of thousands of people in the fan zone watching the game collectively? What will the actual experience be like for the Russians?
It's a bit bizarre because the weather is not actually good this week in Sochi. Last week we were hitting close to 40 degrees, but there's been no sunshine for the last couple of days. It's very humid and overcast. I think right now it's 24 degrees only, which is it's actually warmer in Ireland than Sochi at the moment, basically, on average this week. As for the fan zone, it's a peculiar sort of thing. I mean, I've been in a few of the World Cup cities. I mean, Moscow is absolutely hopping. Rostov on Don was actually amazing. I mean, for a city that used to be very dilapidated before, they've really done it up. The Sochi fan zone, Brazil are staying down here. It was very busy for the first couple of weeks. It's tailed off this week, and locals kind of think the Brazilians have run out of money, basically, because there's been reports of like that Brazilians have been moving out of hotels into hostels. A few of them have been sleeping in the park and stuff because, it's expensive here. And, a beer is €6 or €7. So, for the Brazilians, it's quite expensive. The atmosphere is a bit weird this week again because we had a large contingent of Mexicans staying here and a large contingent of Ecuadorians, and they've all left. And the Russians haven't really arrived yet. And the Croatian representation here is very small.
Okay, so it's actually that weird part of the tournament where the World Cup kind of begins to feel like it's over and finishing. A lot of these cities, this is going to be the last game that they actually get to host in. So that definitely my memory of the World Cup in 2006 was that the group stages is the mad party that everybody has. And then after that, it's much smaller pockets as people just go home.
Yeah, and people run out of money, like I said. I mean, it's pretty expensive to keep going. Most people are on the lash every night for 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, it's only noticeable. I think, what's going on now is that because Russia are doing so well, and because Sochi is what it is, you're basically going to get a lot of really rich people coming down this weekend because black market tickets are going for €3,000 or €4,000 at the moment,
right.
And people are buying them. I mean, I have 2 tickets. I've had a personal offer of $2,500 for my 2 tickets, unsolicited, by the way. And obviously, I'm not going to accept it. But but that's just basically what's going on. So basically, you're getting your wealthy Moscow middle classes coming down here now, and the dynamic is very different. So we've moved from sort of having, cheeky chappies from South America and lots of fun to sort of here comes the guys in the Maybachs and the Rolls Royces, basically, and it's kind of changing dramatically. As for your original question about the Russians with the World Cup and how they feel about it. I mean, look, I just like to point out something. A lot of people are saying, they're on drugs, blah, blah, blah. The Russian team is actually not that bad. I mean, they qualified for the last 2 major championships. They were hopeless in both finals, but the fact is they did qualify. And if you look at who they've beaten, I mean, they've beaten 2 very bad teams, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, maybe the 2 worst teams in the tournament along with Panama. And they've gotten lucky against a very disorganised Spain who fired their manager 2 days before the start and clearly weren't right. And look, at the end of the day, if Ireland were playing at home against Spain, we'd fancy our chances of getting a draw as well, on any given day. So that's basically what Russia got, and they got lucky in the shootout.
So the Russian public aren't kind of... they're enjoying this as a benefit, as kind of unexpected joy, as opposed to, oh my God, we're suddenly world beaters.
Yeah, I mean, they're under no illusions. I mean, I think Croatia are probably a little bit better organised than Spain. There's a couple of Croatian players that played in and out of the Russian league over the years. I remember Petr Koza played for Lokomotiv Moscow a few years ago. So they're probably pretty more familiar with the Croats in a way than they are with the Spanish. And I mean, they're also fellow Slavs and the mentality is quite similar. So I think they're probably more afraid of Croatia than they were of Spain. But look, your original point you raised me when we started was about perceptions of Russia.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
And this is very important because, look, I'm not going to go on and on, but I came here 8 years ago now. And when I came here, I had an incredibly negative attitude towards Russia. I mean, I would have been like, Putin runs the whole place. I mean, he's a very scary man. I don't want to spend too much time in that place, The FSB, KGB, they used to be going to follow me around everywhere and bug my telephone. I really thought like that. I mean, because I grew up reading the British and American media like we all do in Ireland, because we don't really have foreign correspondents in Ireland, as you know. The Irish Times have a few, but most of them aren't even Irish anyway, So basically, the thing is like that. When I came here first, I was almost paranoid. I was, bricking it. And slowly over a few months, my guard went down and, and I got more into the place. And obviously, I stayed for a long time. Russians themselves, when they go abroad, the ones who can speak English or other languages, I mean, now, by the way, the German media are not so stereotypical about Russia as the British media, for example. But they're horrified by what they read. And if you ask any Russian person living in Dublin, maybe you should get one on, they're going to tell you that what they read and hear about their country in our media, or the British media, has no reflection on the reality of life in Russia. Of course, Russia is by no means perfect. Of course, it's a soft authoritarian state. There's no doubt about that. But the idea like that people are living in fear or something, or it's some kind of, brutal country, is completely nonsense. And what the World Cup has done is it's allowed foreigners to come here and see it for themselves. And obviously the reaction is very different than, what's usually said about the place. I mean, and if you look at the UK, for example, before the World Cup, the BBC ran what amounted to a defamation campaign against Russia, the Daily Mail, the Sun as well. I mean, I remember picking up the Daily Telegraph in an airport and I read a headline about K9 KGB death squads that were going around, murdering dogs in cities. And I remember Edward Lucas of the London Times telling the BBC that the Russians would probably give the English team drugs to slow them down.
Well, you sent me that tweet from March. We just put it up there. Russia expert at Edward Lucas says it is not impossible for Russian state to attack #England team at the World Cup. This is Jeremy Vine tweeting this. For example, by administering a substance to slow them down while they play matches.
Like alcohol, for example. But, the point is like that. I mean, and I have to say, that particular individual is often used by RTE as well as a Russia expert. And as far as I'm aware, he's not been in Russia for over a decade. I mean, and it's very frustrating for someone like me who's over here all the time. I mean, when you go home to Ireland and you hear people pontificating about Russia on the radio or television who've either never been here or maybe have been here once or twice in their lives. And it's very frustrating. And it's the same as you would feel if you were over, say, in Australia and there was some guy ranting and raving about Ireland, and had never even been to the country and was calling us all leprechauns or pixies or something. I mean, and that's what it amounts to. And a lot of the chickens have come home to roost now, because what's happened is that, a lot of people, media figures, public figures, whether it's Gary Neville, for example, or it's maybe journalists from England that don't usually cover Russia, soccer journalists or whatever, and they've kind of are tweeting and writing that it's been completely different to what they expected. And I mean, I think the British media needs to have a serious look at itself about that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, by osmosis, or due to economic realities, we rely on the British media for our foreign coverage. I mean, almost all the Irish newspapers take their foreign coverage from the Daily Telegraph or the Guardian or whatever, so we get it that way as well.
But ultimately, though, Brian, I'm sure that there has been some sort of cosmetics at play in Russia over the last couple of weeks. It is a very planned, organised advertisement of the country to the world. It would be stupid of the country not to clean up any negatives that they have going on. So I'm sure it's not the full, real experience we're getting. That being said, you're right. I mean, the things that we're seeing are largely positive, and of course some of that is authentic, but it can't all be authentic, surely.
No, but then again, I mean, how do you, for example, if you come here to, I mentioned Rostov-on-Don earlier. I mean, it's a city I used to dislike passionately. It was a bit of a mess, to be honest. But there's 2 million people living there. How do you get 2 million people to kind of put on a fake face for 3 weeks? I mean, of course, there's an element of that, and there's going to be an element of that anywhere. I mean, when we had the Special Olympics in Ireland years ago, we tidied up our towns and we put out flower beds and we welcomed people, and, that wouldn't be the case all the time. Of course, that's true. And of course, there's a lot of very bad things about Russia. Russia is by no means a perfect or even great society. I'm just trying to make the point that it's not as bad as it was been made out to be. And I absolutely accept your point. There's a huge element of that. Let's talk negatives for a second. The police have been very relaxed. That's not the way the Russian police usually are. They're usually very heavy-handed. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's people going around having selfies with cops and that. There are circumstances where if you did that in other circumstances, they may not smile with you. They may take you away somewhere. And that is true. So I absolutely take your point. But I'm just trying to make the point that, life is like, there's no perfect society. Life is not perfect here, but it's not as bad as it was been made out to be. There was never that kind of danger. And the problem was that people like me, who were trying to say before the World Cup that, look, it's fine, come, we were being shouted down by the people saying that, you're all going to get bludgeoned to death or something,
Yeah. I mean, look, so we've got John Duggan out there, and he's having the time of his life, and is actually independently reporting pretty much all the same stuff that you are about what life is actually like there. And obviously he's having that World Cup experience, but has embedded himself with a bunch of Irish people who are out living there. And like I didn't really want to go to the World Cup, I have to say, when this was all being talked about. Part of me was a little bit relieved we weren't all going to be decamping to Russia for 6 weeks when Ireland didn't qualify. And now I'm really disappointed that didn't happen and that we didn't get the opportunity to go out and see for ourselves with our own eyes exactly what life is like. And that's the stupidity. But sometimes you've got to chisel away at that.
Look, I was kind of hoping for Jocks or Ghosts of Samara. It obviously didn't happen. I mean, but I mean, the point is like that. Look, to explain it properly, I mean, like, the German World Cup experience in 2006 is a great example. I was at that, actually. And, the Germans had a reputation for being stoic and unapproachable and severe and stern, and that World Cup kind of lifted that off them. Now, whether the same is going to happen to the Russians, I don't know. But I have to say, like, let's talk about Ireland and Russia for a moment. One of the most famous journalists here, Vladimir Pozner, do you remember Space Bridge in the 80s? No? Phil Donahue? Okay, so Posner used to present a show in the 80s in the States called Space Bridge. It was on NBC, and basically it was, or CBS, one or the other. And the idea was that Phil Donahue was over in America, and Vladimir Pozner was in Leningrad, as it was then, or whatever, or Gorky in the Soviet Union. And the idea was for ordinary Russians and Americans to ask each other questions. And Posner's a huge star here. He's kind of like Russia's Gay Byrne, basically. And he's 84 years of age. And, Posner has said frequently that he thinks the Irish are the most similar Westerners to the Russians. And one example, he said, they laugh, they cry, they're prone to bouts of melancholy, they drink too much, they've got good writers. And it is true that Irish and Russians have a lot in common. And that's why it's an awful pity that the Irish didn't get to come over here. And, I mean, Denmark weren't that great. We could have taken them. But, like, I obviously regret that deeply. And, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's sad, but I mean,
Your pinned tweet at the moment, we've had your Twitter handle up there, and people should go and check it out, is a blog post that you did about your journalism from your time in Ireland that you felt you had to do because you were being accused of being a spy. I guess you were being accused of being a spy on the back of writing stuff that wasn't incredibly critical of Russia.
Look, at the end of the day, I only came over here because of the recession in Ireland years ago. Lots of people left the country at the time. I mean, to go to wherever, Australia, Canada, America. I happened to come here, that's all. Not a spy, anyway. I mean, the point is just that, like, look, I just came here. I liked it. I mean, there's a lot of problems here, but the problem is, like, okay, let me explain. The British journalists who are based here, one particular difference between Irish journalism and British journalism is that not almost all, but the majority of Irish journalists have studied journalism at university. Would that be normal? I mean, most people have done communications in DCU or went to Rathmines College of Commerce or Ballyfermot or whatever have you. That's not the case in Britain. If you, for example, I think 8 of the 11 national newspaper editors in Britain went to Oxford, a university that doesn't even offer journalism. And almost all the Moscow correspondents in the British media have been to Oxford or Cambridge or Edinburgh, one of the elite universities. My background is very different. I mean, I started working for the Evening Herald when I was 19 via the Weekender in Navan, actually, which we're first gone now for a few months. It's a totally different background. I see myself as a journalist. I don't see myself as an ideologue. I don't have an ideology, to be honest with you. And I try to report facts. And as I see it, coverage of here is not being done in that manner. It's been done from ideological perspective, Cold War, Iron Curtain kind of mentality. And the British and American journalists here are using it as a platform to eventually, as a backdoor into a top job back home, basically. I mean, you do a couple of years in Moscow, you toe the party line, you go home, you get a nice position in London or Washington or New York or whatever. That's not an option for me. I'm Irish. I mean, no Irish newspaper can afford to have a Moscow correspondent. Being here is not going to make me the editor of the Irish Times, so I just report it as I see it, and that's it. And unfortunately, because I'm not towing the Western Party line, I've had a lot of flack, and not just me. I mean, people, it's even worse for Americans like Stephen Cohen or, guys like that who have literally had careers ruined and have been smeared left, right and centre for not being on message. And, it's pretty heavy, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's how it is.
The Trump stuff must be particularly interesting then at this point in human history. That whole kind of Trump as a Russian puppet and the allegations that they have some kind of evidence of him doing some wrong in Moscow. What's that story being reported like, and what's it like to kind of watch that unfold from within Russia at the minute?
Incredulity. I mean, look, 2011. Do you remember the Bolotnia protests here in 2011? There was a huge thing because basically Putin's United Russia Party had kind of messed with the ballot. It hadn't been a fair election. The point is that Putin was unable to fix his own election in 2011. I mean, there was hundreds of thousands of people on the streets across Russia against it. Since then, they've had to clean up the elections here. I mean, the last couple of elections have been much cleaner than before. The last one was probably the cleanest election in Russian history. The guy is not able to, as I said, fix his own election successfully. The idea that he could go over to the most powerful country in the world and fix their election is ridiculous. I mean, as for election meddling, did Russia meddle in the election? Possibly. Yes, they did. But I would doubt that their meddling had much effect, to be honest with you. I mean, because it was so crude. The Russians would argue that the Americans have been interfering in their politics ever since the Soviet Union ended. I mean, a couple of examples. In 1993, when Boris Yeltsin literally shelled his own parliament, literally fired tank rounds at his own parliament, the Duma, Bill Clinton described him as Russia's answer to Abraham Lincoln. I mean, in 1996, American advisors helped Yeltsin to win the election, and they actually made a movie about it. The movie's called Spinning Boris, and it stars the guy from I forget his name. It'll come back to me. And they and even as recently as 2011, I mean, you've had American support for the Russian liberal opposition. You've had all that kind of thing going on. So the Russians would argue that you guys have been interfering in our elections for 27 years, and they would argue that if any meddling they did, well, how do you like those apples? That's what they would basically say.
Yeah, and
that's the way they would look.
Is that a topic of conversation amongst the Russians that you speak with, though? Like, do they care about that kind of stuff?
No, they don't. Absolutely not. I mean, you never hear anybody mentioning it. The only people that mention it are maybe journalists. Anyone outside of that bubble, they don't really care. I mean, if you turn around to the average Nikolai in the street or Sergei in the street and say that, they'll just laugh at you. I mean, they basically say to you that Putin's got enough of his own problems to be worrying about without worrying about that. Now, I would make a point, though. I don't want to come across, I want to try and make balance as I can. I would say that they did want Trump to win the election. Not everybody. Some Russians I know preferred the idea of Clinton because she's more consistent. But of course, look, Hillary Clinton was basically advocating war with Russia, essentially, in Syria. I mean, she was essentially advocating that America escalates to such a degree that it would lead to confrontation. Trump was promising improved relations with Russia. So why would Russia, of course they'd want the guy asking for improved relations to win. That's logical, isn't it?
Yeah. One last point. The legacy for this World Cup, it seems from this part of the world, is going to be that we might think twice about being scared of going to Russia and doing business with Russia and actually kind of having a mature 21st century relationship with Russia as opposed to one based on the cartoonish reporting that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what I'd like to see. I mean, like, as I said to you already, I find it very frustrating. Like, for example, you're talking about Twitter. Sometimes I will write something on Twitter and some Irish journalists will write back stuff like, that's because of your guy, your man or something. I say, who's your man? They will say, Putin, a guy who I've never met in my life, for example. Sorry, I tell a lie. I did meet him once years ago, but we didn't have chat or anything, just shaking hands, you know. But the point is anyway that, and the journalist in particular I'm referring to there has never been to Russia. I know that because I asked him. There is a stereotype out there. It's very frustrating. One hopes that the World Cup will go some way to mending that. But it doesn't just exist in journalism, Ger. It exists in with politicians. Now, there are exceptions. I mean, I know a number of Fine Gael TDs who have asked me for advice about Russia over the years, and they're very open-minded about the country. But I've also encountered Irish politicians who will say the most bizarre things about Russia, and the most bizarre stereotypes, and you can't do business with those guys and blah de blah. So it cuts both ways. I do think the Irish are more open-minded than the British, though. I've always thought that. I do think the Irish are skeptical, a more skeptical people. They don't buy everything they're told. I find the British to be much more naive than the Irish, for example, when it comes to stuff like that. I think our people are a bit smarter.
Sorry, just one final point for me, Brian. Do you think Theresa May is going to accept the renewed invitation to come to the World Cup?
Oh, this is a funny one. They never invited her, by the way.
Okay.
I read that in a Russian newspaper yesterday. I think it was Kommersant. They said that they actually issued no formal invitations to any British dignitaries. That's not how they operate on diplomatic protocol. The British in other words, they're saying everybody is welcome. There were no specific invitations. And if the British want to send a VIP, they have to notify the Russians, through the relative channels. So the Guardian report that they renewed their invitation is not true. They actually never issued one in the first place.
Right.
So it's basically, if Theresa May wants to come, she's welcome. But they didn't specifically say, hey, Theresa or Mrs. May, we invite you. They didn't do that.
Brian, good stuff. Thanks for joining us this morning.
No problem.
Bryan MacDonald giving us the view from Russia. You just want to follow him on Twitter if you want to get any more of those type of details. And I'll just give you that Twitter handle again. It is at 27KHV. So that's a different viewpoint from some of the stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting lifestyle, I assume, being an Irishman over there. Imagine the process of being accused of being a spy. I'm sure that was an interesting time in his life. It's you've done something right if somebody's accusing you of being a spy, is what I say. I want to be accused of a spy. Be a spy.
I'm sure you're up here in Dublin spying, reporting back. And
the Kerry man did an expose last week saying Eoin Sheehan is a spy.
Yeah,
I am.
Right, back to the Irish Open, the golf. We can have a quick look at the leaderboard as it stands. Play is about 2 hours old, I suspect, at Ballyliffin at this point. And Mikko Ilonen, 3 under through 4 holes. He is ripping it up. So not a green, white and orange flag to be seen on that opening page. Robert Rock on 2 under, Rafa Cabrera-Bello on 2 under, Matthew Southgate. It's a good week for the Southgates, eh? He'll be going grand up until Saturday afternoon, and then it'll all come crashing down. Or else he'll go all the way through to Sunday and win the tournament. It's all in his name.
Graham MacDonald is level par through 3 holes.
There you go. Best of the Irish after 3 holes. It looks like it's going to be a lovely day out there. There was a bit of cloud this morning apparently, but the forecast is good. So here's Nathan chatting to Rory McIlroy at his press conference yesterday in Ballyliffin.
Rory, you were mentioning wanting it too much at times, and I'm wondering, is that similar at the majors at the moment? You'd only reminding it's coming up in 4 years since your last major. Is that something that stresses you out when you think about the passage of time?
Not really. Look, if I didn't win another major for my career, I'd still be nothing's going to change in my life whether I win one or not. But obviously, I don't feel like I'll have fulfilled my potential. But at the same time, there's other things in my life that are more important than golf. But look, I'd be disappointed, but again, it's not going to change things. I don't panic. It doesn't keep me up at night. But look, I just need to give myself chances. I was proud of myself to get into the final group at the Masters this year. I didn't have a good Sunday, but I would have needed something pretty special to beat Patrick anyway. US Open was the US Open, and I've got 2 more chances this year to hopefully play myself into contention, and that was my goal. My goal this year, it wasn't to win majors, it was just to give myself a chance and to put myself in positions to see how I fare. I did that at Augusta. I felt like I learned a bit from it, and then hopefully going into Carnoustie and Bellerive, I can put myself in similar positions.
There's not many elite sports people who I think would be honest enough to say that this isn't the most important thing in your life. When did that change? Is it the obvious thing of when you get married that there's another focus?
Yeah, I think I've always had other interests, and I've always had things that have been a big part of my life. But yeah, I think getting married and thinking about the future and what that entails, that's huge. So I think as you get older and as you evolve as a person, you change, and your perspective on things changes a little bit, and it's not it's not just the golf nowadays. There's a lot more that goes into it, and it's still my career, and I still want to make the most of it, and I still feel like I have a lot of time left to make my mark on golf. But at the same time, as I said, it doesn't keep me up at night thinking if I never win another major, I can't live with myself.
Yeah, that's the answers from Rory at the press conference yesterday to Nathan, and pretty much that is the back page story in terms of the golf. Anyway, the answers to Nathan's pretty good questions there.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was Nathan who asked all the questions.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, the Irish Independent have done a very good piece of journalism there. But no, it's Nathan Murphy.
Yeah. He also spoke yesterday to Shane Lowry. Didn't go quite as well. Have a look or listen.
No. We're good. All right, I'm delighted to say Shane Lowry has joined us in our Off the Ball studio. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're enjoying the sunshine?
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
The container had they look like minions. The container had obviously filled with helium just as they did the interview.
Yeah. Why does it feel like I'm suffocating in here, Nathan?
The full thing is actually worth a look. It's on.
We're good. All right, I'm delighted to say Shane Lowry has joined us in our Off the Ball studio. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're enjoying the sunshine?
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
Shane Lowry's grand. It's just Nathan, is it?
Yeah, I was like, is that really how Shane Lowry talks? And then I heard one of Nathan's questions. I was like, no.
Yeah, so that full thing it was a Facebook Live that the lads did yesterday afternoon. There was a bit of an issue with the sound compression, which has obviously been fixed in the meantime because the show last night sounded perfect. So, but we thought that was worth bringing you anyway because sometimes good stuff accidentally happens. OTB AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Obviously, we are live from Ballyliffin this whole week. There is an OB coming there from the clubhouse on Friday night. Paul McGinley and Des Smith are already confirmed. Beef pulled out because Donegal aren't playing in Croker.
Yeah, protest, man of the people, man of the GAA. He's going to Cavan as well today to meet Tom Ryan.
He knows it. He knows what the truth is. Yeah, so 7 to 9 is live tonight from the Dubai Duty-Free Irish Open in Ballyliffin. John Giles is in studio alongside Richie for the football show. And then tomorrow morning in OTB AM, Dave is going to join Owen. We're going to talk about the World Cup semi-finals and we look ahead to the rest of the weekend sport. Now, today we are talking sailing as well. Irish sailors have a big chance to bag the very first guaranteed places at the 2020 Olympics in any sport at the World Championships, which begin a little bit later on this month in Denmark. Ahead of the event, we spoke with Aoife Hopkins, Finn Lynch and Liam Glynn.
All right, I'm here with Aoife, Finn and Liam. As you can see, they're all set and ready to go for the World Championships 2018 in Aarhus in Denmark. It's a big summer, folks. Aoife, I might just start with yourself. You might just explain the significance of the World Championships this year, in particular context of the Olympics.
Well, it's our first and biggest opportunity to qualify for the 2020 Olympics, and it's also sailing is going to be the first sport that has the opportunity to qualify for the 2020 Olympics. So it's pretty major. Like for me, 40% of the 2020 places are going at the Worlds, and it's it's going to be a pretty big event.
Absolutely, 40% is a huge number. Was that must have been different? Was that different from Rio in 2016? I presume it was.
The qualifications for the laser, what myself and Liam are sailing, was there was a much bigger quota for the Olympics last time around. So this time around that we've dropped, there's 20 less places going to compete at the Games. So this at the Worlds this year, it's only 14 nations for the laser that get to qualify. So it'll be a PB performance from myself or Liam if we manage to do it. But we've done a lot of training there in Denmark where the Worlds are going to be, and really looking forward to give it a good shot.
And Liam, is it really the Olympics that you're looking at in relation to this event? Because it is the World Championships, it is a huge event to be successful in its own rights, right?
Yeah, it's a really big event, but I guess everyone's focus is towards the Olympics and getting a qualifying spot. For me, it's a big learning regatta because I've still got under 21 regattas to focus at this year.
Talk to us a little bit about the event. What is the event? Is it the laser radial, right?
Yeah, so I'm the laser radial, which is the women's version of the laser. And so for us, we actually have a bigger quota this year in terms of Olympic qualification. So we have 18 places rather than 14 up for grabs in Aarhus. So it's a pretty competitive class. I mean, people sail it from kind of 14 years of age up until 30, early 30s, and you know there's going to be Olympic medalists and world champions and everything there in Aarhus, so it's definitely going to be tough, but yeah, should be challenging, but I think for me it would be, if I was to pull it off in Aarhus, it would be a really, really good result. I think it would be challenging, but it is doable kind of based on my past results. I was 21st at the Europeans last year, which was, you know, if I was to repeat that, it would be good enough.
It is an interesting one when you mentioned the high calibre of competitors that are going to be up against you in Denmark over the next couple of weeks. And I guess there is kind of a blurring of the lines between learning from that high level competition and also from going at it from your own perspective to qualify for the Olympics, because it's only really in hindsight, if things don't work out, that you will get to appreciate the experience of learning from those other people that are high-end competitors that will be far better known, I guess, around the world to sailing fans.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was actually a big thing for me kind of in the last few years. I've started doing more senior events. I'm like Liam, I'm still under 21 this year, but I've been doing kind of the senior events for kind of 3 years, and it is mad because it's like sailing with, you know, celebrities almost. Like I remember for the 2012 Olympics, you know, Annalise came fourth and we were out on the water sailing Toppers, which is a youth boat out in Blessington, and came in off the water to watch the medal race on the TV. And, you know, I don't know what age I was 14, you know, in a youth boat, and these are the girls who I'm now racing against. So it's, you know, it's really cool like that, to kind of be racing against people you've watched, you know, sailing a few years ago when you were just a kid, basically.
Yeah, I can imagine. Would you guys have had the same experience growing up and watching these guys and competing against them now?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of have to forget that these are the guys that you were looking up to before you got into the class. I remember in Rio, I was the youngest competitor in the laser class, and kind of had to stop yourself from looking around and thinking, oh, maybe this guy's going to medal, maybe this is a world champion right beside me. But I think it's the more experience you get, the more it doesn't faze you. And now 3 years in, I'm 3 years into kind of competing at a high level in the senior circuit, and you don't really think about these things anymore. It's just focusing on yourself and trying to do the best you can.
Just to take one quick pit stop here in terms of an explainer, you might just explain to people at home who don't know the difference, for example, between the laser and the 49er. Is it a huge shift to go from one to the other? What is the major difference between the two?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a very, very big difference. You guys might be able to help me out. The lasers is a single-handed boat, so it's just one person on the boat, and the 49er, I guess, is a much faster, flashier two-person boat. So ours is more tactical. Boats are much closer, and it's really a fight. And you could probably say the 49er is more about
speed orientated, I guess.
Yeah, more about speed and keeping the boat under control.
Okay.
Our boats are relatively easy to sail, but that makes it harder to get edges at the top of the fleet.
Right, okay, that's very interesting. And like from your own perspective in your own career at the moment, Liam, like are you looking around, keeping your options open at the moment, or are you already at the stage in your sailing life where you're thinking, right, I've got to pigeonhole myself right now? And maybe pigeonholing is the wrong term to use. You've got to pick one and stick with it because that's how you're going to have the best level of success.
Yeah, at the moment I'm definitely, I think laser is the way to go. I think in the future, if I have success in the laser, I'll think about moving, but I kind of, once I've stuck at something, I want to get really good at it and then see after that where to go.
At what point did you know you'd be able to be a national sailor? Was it like 14 years old, as Aoife said? Was that when you started properly and you started to realise, wow, I'm pretty good at this thing?
Yeah, I guess the move up from youth classes in the topper, probably 13, 14 when I moved up from that, and then you get into the radial and you see you get onto the Irish system, and that's kind of when you know it's possible. You can see the steps ahead of you.
And I guess those steps.
Liam's being modest. He was the world champion in the youth boat, so he knew from a fairly young age that he was pretty good.
I'm good at this.
World champion. I'll give it a go. Hey.
Yeah. So talk to us about that world championship. What age group was that at, and when did this happen?
It's in 2013 in the topper class. I was in France, the event, so I'd done 3 world championships at that stage, and was getting close to the win. So
it must feel pretty good to be the best in the world at something, right?
Yeah, no, it feels great. Your man here finished second.
He took my record.
Just pipped him.
It's okay. I'm happy.
That's it. So there's clearly, like, judging by the volume, judging by some of the trailblazers we've had in the sport, there is an internal rivalry, and it's a healthy rivalry, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Everybody wants to be the best, wants to be number one. We've all had a lot of success in youth classes. We have a very young team, Irish sailing team right now. I think the average age is 21 or 22. So we've all been really successful in youth classes, and now it's just about bridging the gap and, trying to catch up to the older guys and repeat that success in the senior classes.
To what extent, Eva, do you think that the coverage of sailing is growing and people's awareness and I guess people's knowledge of the sport is growing as a result of what we've seen in the Olympics? Huge success, obviously, in recent years.
Yeah, it was great. Like, I think obviously Annalise's results have just, raised awareness to no end across country about like the sport that we do, and that's absolutely fantastic because it's kind of just talking to someone who isn't a sailor, and a few years ago you'd say you were a sailor and they go, oh, that's nice, now that's a lovely hobby there, but nowadays almost. Yeah, whereas nowadays it's like, oh really, that's great, oh, you know Annalise Murphy, do you? And it's a proper sport now. And I was thinking earlier, like in Rio 2016 our 2 medals were boating, and it's quite nice to have that kind of even just that awareness of that our sport is a sport,
Owen Gian doing journalism in the company of future medal winners.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of future medal winners. Things are like, you would say that sailing, like, to the untrained eye, it would seem that sailing in Ireland is at its peak, but I think we're pretty high on a mountain that's still got a bit of road to climb yet.
Hey,
that's just continuing that analogy right there. We're pretty far across the ocean, and there's plenty more water left to sail through. Is probably the correct analogy. Yes, more medals to come, Ger.
It's just a drop in the ocean. Okay, we also spoke with James O'Callaghan, Irish Sailing Performance Director, who had some pretty interesting things to say about how Sailing Ireland goes about spotting sailors who have the potential to make it to the Olympics.
Talk to us a little bit about that talent identification then. You mentioned Finn and you mentioned Schaefer there. Like, how do you identify those top class sailors that are going to be potential medal winners at the Olympics?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the cycle it's very broad. I mean, the junior squads are quite large. They would be a big portion of the fleet sailing, but they're in a structure. They're learning about functional movement in the gym. They're learning about sailing. It's basics and just getting them interested in the sport and the competitive side. And then as they graduate into the academy, it becomes a little bit more intense. And we use what we call the matrix, and they're assessed on all different levels as to what level of performance they have. So we have 10 years now of data where we know if they're hitting certain benchmarks, they have the potential to go forward and ultimately win more medals for Ireland.
How do you find out about that sort of stuff? How do you develop the matrix? Are you looking at foreign models? Are you just...
No, it's a piece of, I suppose it's a piece of intellectual property that we developed ourselves. I suppose from our experience as a group of coaches, and we also brought in a human resource expert in terms of how employees are managed internally as well, and we've tweaked that over the years. So for example, what we found was early days that we put a lot of weighting on the results at youth level, but in actual fact behaviour and attitude and all these cultural things are probably a bigger indicator of success going forward, because the Olympic discipline and the programme it's a hard one. You're on your own a lot. There's a lot of challenges travelling and stuff like that. So those sort of things, the cultural things, become more important. But obviously the results are important. But we just changed the weighting in the matrix to tweak the system a little bit.
Right, that's very interesting. So you're looking at the type of person rather than the actual standard of sailor. Of course, you're looking at the standard of sailor.
Yeah, both. But you can't look at it in isolation. Sure. So you might have a super talented kid but has a really bad attitude. So that person ultimately probably won't succeed in elite sport. It's a very narrow band of people that can even qualify for the Olympics. So it's important that the culture in the academy is right from the beginning, so that they have a better chance of transitioning into the senior programmes.
Right, okay. And apologies if you're not aware of this, but are other sports in Ireland using this matrix at the moment in terms of putting a lot of weight on the behaviour of young people?
I'm sure they are. I mean, boxing is always the program that we've sort of aspired to emulate. They bring people in very young into the formal national structure. So I don't know their bespoke matrix, but I'm sure it's something similar in terms of you'd get a talented kid at boxing, but they need to have the discipline and the right attitude to go all the way.
For sure.
So I'd imagine, I mean, and again, I'm sure with rugby and the other sports, I mean, you hear about the analytics and stuff like that, so I'd be, I'm not privy to it, but I'd be very surprised if it's not there.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to having that as a template, one of the things that other people can learn from as well is the high level of the performance headquarters. Now, talk to us a little bit about that, because this is new. This is a new opportunity for sailors to stay at home and get top level training here in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, we toyed with the idea of a performance centre for a long time, but it was actually Rory Fitzpatrick, our new head coach in Irish sailing, so Annalise's coach. When he came back from Rio, he was like, right, you know, we now have proof of concept. We can take an athlete from 15, 16 and take them all the way to the Olympic podium. How do we replicate this across all our programs? So our other programs were medal race finalists, but we want to upgrade that to medal winning programs. And what he did was he looked across all of the disciplines that we compete in. So we compete in, there's 10 Olympic disciplines, but due to the scarcity of resources, we decided, right, we're going to focus on 4. And so he looked at those 4 disciplines, and he looked at the medalists in each of those 4 disciplines, and he looked all the way back to the top 10 in all of those disciplines. And what became very obvious was they all had a performance centre. They all had their athletes in one hub. They all had their coaches working out of that hub. So all of a sudden it became obvious that the differential between the teams that were coming sort of between 8 and 15 and sort of 6 and 1, 6 and gold medal, was performance centre and coaches living in the same country as the athletes. And what that enables you to do is, first of all, you get cross-fertilisation of ideas because all the coaches are working out of the same venue. You get a better monitoring environment for your athletes because they're always at the same place. And they're also able to do gym and study in the same day, whereas before, you know, if you're a development level athlete, we like to have a bit of balance in their lives so that if they are in third level education, they're able to do their first campaign while getting some sort of formal education under their belt. But when you're doing that, you're balancing gym training, your study and your sail training. So if you can have that in a hub where you have the sail training in Dún Laoghaire, you've got option of various universities in Dublin, and you've got the gym in Dún Laoghaire or in town, it just makes it very easy for that athlete to do all the things they need to do in one day.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.